Good morning. Thank you so much for joining the Institute for Local Government, the Fair Political Practices Commission, and colleagues from local government agencies today for our discussion on campaigning during COVID and practical solutions for fielding an election and running a campaign during our experience of COVID-19. So pleased to have everyone here today, and I do want to thank our speakers for providing us their time during what must be one of the busiest times of their life and their careers. My name is Randy K. Stevens. I am a program manager with the Institute for Local Government. I lead our Workforce and Civics Education Initiative, and I'm here today to help support our work in leadership and governance and create opportunity to share information with our colleagues in local government agencies who are currently fielding elections and staffing and supporting candidates and incumbents as they go through this incredibly unique experience of a campaign and during COVID. Today, we'll be discussing effective elections and transfers of power in decision-making, as they are key to maintaining our trust in local government. During this webinar, our local government election officials and experts from the Fair Political Practices Commission will share best practices from the field about elections and campaigning during COVID-19. So what you'll hear today are some of their best practices and experiences and anecdotes of what's happening in the field. You will also hear some fundamentals and information about deadlines and very specific content that you need to know as either a staff member or a candidate. We'll start off with an overview about what the Institute for Local Government is, why we're here today, and then we'll continue on into our presentations with Shannon Boucher, Registrar of Voters, Santa Clara County, Dr. Alana Jeydel with the Fair Political Practices Commission, and Nora Pimentel, Assistant City Clerk for the City of Santa Clara. Thank you, Nora, Alana, and Shannon for being with us today. After their presentations conclude, we will have a Q&A session. So I'd like to invite all of you to please use the chat function and submit your questions through writing them out and typing them and hitting send. At any point during the presentations today, you can hit send and share a question. And it can be for any of our presenters or for the Institute for Local Government. And we will get to those questions as much as we can through the time that we have allotted today. But we are committed to ensuring your attendance concludes about noon, so we will try not to go over that. Now, a little bit about the Institute for Local Government. We're a nonprofit, we're nonpartisan, and we are here to help. We are a nonprofit that's been affiliated with the League of California Cities, the California State Association of Counties, and the California Special Districts Association. We've been around for more than 60 years, providing support and services to local government agencies, officials, and staff throughout that time. We also provide easy-to-use resources available on our website at ca-ilg.org and welcome you to visit our website for additional information. In addition to the work we do on leadership and governance and workforce and civics education, we also provide supports and services related to sustainable and resilient communities and public engagement. We do this by providing a number of services, education and training, like this particular webinar, technical assistance or direct relationship support services for agencies and staff, and we also provide capacity building and convening support. Our mission is really to help local government leaders navigate the complex and challenging issues they face every day. We want to help you increase your capacity and build trust in the communities that you serve. We have a number of resources that you can access online, including a whole section related to COVID-19. We have a wealth of webinars that we've done this year, so if you're looking for past information, please see our webinar section. We also have something that will be handy as you seek out supporting your new officials, or for those of you who are candidates, we do have orientation materials to help you understand more about your role and the responsibilities and the functions of local government, and to understand the agencies outside of the office you're running for. If you need more information about what a special district is, a county, or a city, we have that covered for you. So please go see our orientation materials. We also have a section on our website dedicated to leadership, and this is to really help you understand and navigate kind of the complex relationship between staff and elected officials, and also to really understand best practices of kind of decision making and your role in that. We'd like to mention that our affiliate organizations also have a suite of resources related to COVID-19 and the impacts they're seeing as cities, counties, and special districts. So I offer these websites from the League, Special Districts Association, and State Association of Counties as resources to you. We'll be doing a few polls this morning to find out a little bit more about who's joined us today. And again, thank you for your time in joining the Institute for this webinar and hearing from our key experts on elections and decision making and the transitions that are happening in 2020. For now, I'd like to invite my colleague Melissa Keene to go ahead and share in the poll on the back end.
Randy Kay, thank you. I'll get that poll launched in just a second, but I also want to mention that the slides don't seem to be advancing. So if we could look into that while we get these polls going, that would be great. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this first poll for all of the attendees.
Thank you, Melissa.
Hopefully you all can see the poll question up on your screen now. So we're just curious what best describes your agency. If you're with a city or a county or a special district, perhaps with the state, or with a private company or a nonprofit. We'll give you all just a minute to answer this question. Okay, so it looks like the vast majority of you all are with cities, about 84%. Got a few with the county, about 6% from special districts, handful from the state, and then about 2% from nonprofits or other organizations. Thank you all so much for sharing that. We've got one more poll for you right now. And we're curious, what best describes your relationship to local government? Are you currently a staff member or currently elected official? Are you a consultant? Or are you a candidate? And you all are allowed to choose more than one option here. So for example, if you are an elected official running for re-election, you can pick both of those options. Just trying to get a sense of who's joining us today. Okay, so it looks like we've got about 75% staff, 14% that are currently elected officials, another 14% that are currently candidates. I don't know if there's a complete overlay there, but it's same amount, some consultants, and then a couple others. So thank you so much again for sharing that information with us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Randy Kay to get us back into the presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate you running those polls, Melissa. And I do want to thank my colleague, Melissa Keene, who's on the back end helping with the Q&A, as well as my colleague, Christy Jensen, who is also supporting this webinar. Thanks to the Institute team for ensuring the success. I believe now that you should be able to see the screen with the slide deck. So and if I hear otherwise, I will continue on. Well, we are excited for the main event. First, we'll be hearing today from Registrar of Voters for Santa Clara County, Shannon Boucher. Then we will hear from Nora Pimentel with the City of Santa Clara. And then we will follow up with a presentation by Dr. Alana Jeydel with the Fair Political Practices Commission. I'll go ahead and start now by sharing the biography for our Registrar of Voters, Shannon Boucher. Shannon is the Registrar for the County of Santa Clara. She is a 30-year veteran with the county, having worked for 25 years in the Registrar's office. Shannon has been instrumental in implementing the state's first satellite voting locations using ballot-on-demand technology, implementation of remote accessible vote-by-mail technology, expanding language assistance and voting opportunities, ensuring best practices in elections and security, developing in-house employee training programs, and establishing a just culture in the department. Shannon, we are so pleased to have you here today. Please go ahead and start your presentation.
Well, thank you, Andy, and hello, everybody. I hope you're starting off to have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend. So I'm just going to briefly talk about what the Registrar of Voters office does and some of the changes that we've experienced with this November's election due to COVID, as I'm sure many of you are all encountering it in your own ways. And then I'm going to have some, advice or tips for the jurisdictions and the candidates, and then be happy at the end to answer any questions when we do the Q&A for the webinar. So go ahead and change the slide, please. So let me start with the Registrar of Voters. I'm sure many of you know, but there may be some newbies in the audience, and a lot of this information will be very helpful. So we at the Registrar of Voters, we conduct the elections for all federal, state, and local elections. Here I'm for Santa Clara County. I know there are many of you that may be throughout the state, and maybe your clerk recorder's office helps with the elections. But here in Santa Clara County, the Registrar of Voters is a separate entity from the recorder's or the clerk's office. So we do elections here for over 80 jurisdictions, and that includes, your federal, state levels, but county, city, school, and special districts. And I want to share our mission with you, which is to protect and ensure the community's right to participate in fair, inclusive, accurate, and transparent elections. And we hold that belief very strongly here. We're very passionate at what we do working in elections. So special elections in our department normally take us about 3 months to do because, resolutions aren't due till 88 days before for a measure election. So they take about 3 months. But when you're talking about a general and primary election, the primary takes us about 6 to 8 months, including prep time from beginning to end. And the general elections usually about 5 to 6 months from the beginning to end. So it definitely is a very long process to put on, especially these countywide elections where all the districts are involved. But in addition, we also maintain the voter registration database. We conduct outreach. We do signature verification for like initiative, recall, referendum petition. So a lot of, we have 15 cities in our county, so the city clerks contract with us to do their signature checking for their petitions. And we certify the results back to the city, which I'm sure many of you know. And for candidate filing, so we're the election official for county, judicial, school, and most special districts. We do have one special district that does their own appointing and does their own nomination, but overall that we do most of those. So we do accept filings and forward documentation to the Secretary of State's office, though, for offices where the Secretary of State is the filing official, like Senate and Assembly and Congress. And for municipalities, the city clerk is the election official, but they forward us all of their candidate filings. We do the signature checking of their nomination papers, and we must process and get a copy of all of those paperwork that they're dealing with the candidates. Next slide, please. So as far as conducting elections under COVID, it definitely has been, a very interesting time. We've had a lot of challenges that we have encountered and faced, I'm sure as many of you have. We've had to alter many of our operations, including, how we issue and accept documents, the timing and layouts of our vote center and poll worker trainings, and develop safety protocols that we can follow here in the office for staff and the public coming in, and for all of our vote centers. How will our vote centers run with COVID, with social distancing, et cetera. So I'll briefly touch on those just to give you an idea of some of the things we've done for this November's election. So let's start with jurisdiction training. In the past, what we've done is we would have a city clerk meeting, as we call it, where we invite the city clerks down to our office. We present different items from different divisions inside the Registrar of Voters. And then we do a large focus of the time on the nomination forms between candidate services here in our department and each of the city clerks about how the process is going to work. We go over the forms that are needed for the city clerk to give to the candidate for us because we need those back. So we just altered that by doing online webinars. So we still conducted meetings for our city clerks, our school districts, and our special districts so that they could attend and they could understand the forms and what we were looking for. And then the positive I'm seeing out of doing the webinars this time was that we were able to put those recordings on our website and on YouTube. So, you know, things do happen, and maybe a jurisdiction is unable to attend the meeting. So this way they didn't miss the meeting. They were actually be able to go back and watch the recording. So that was actually very beneficial. So we were able to keep the special meeting for them, just moving to a webinar format. As far as candidate filing, normally candidates would come to the Registrar of Voters, of course, not the city candidates, but to issue and file. So we really, you know, had to rethink how we were going to do the candidate filing. We handle in our county about 300 to 400 candidates every election, including the city, once we total them all together. So we have a lot of people that come into our office. So our candidate services manager, who was very thoughtful and put a lot of, you know, work into making changes. So we implemented a lot of new ways to do filing for our candidate filing period, which included making, she turned every form into an online fillable form that had drop-down menus. It was great. It had auto-populate and auto-complete. So like once you select your jurisdiction, you didn't have to retype your official name every time. It worked very well, actually. And they set appointments for our candidates. So candidates, of course, still could come into our office to issue and to file, but many of them took advantage of setting up an appointment with our staff who would go over the forms with them. They would give them an invite to a secured OneDrive folder, and then they would get online together and walk through the forms and explain everything just like they would if they were at the counter. So it worked out very well, actually. So again, we were still open for everyone to come in, but they could now, you know, be issued their forms electronically. And we also made appointments for the oath of office. So if a person couldn't come into our office or was unable to go to a notary, we made appointments where we could see them swear and do the oath of office that's required on the Declaration of Candidacy. And then, so we were able to handle it that way. And then we just had everyone who wasn't coming in get us their original documents, but they had to be here by the filing deadline. So we definitely did have more people come to the office to do filing, but some did mail them in and had completed the oath online. And but a lot of people took advantage in the issuing not to come in. So it worked out very well. Of course, we were ready with PPE and social distancing and plexiglass and sanitizing the counters after every candidate left. So we were ready either way for in-line, in-office appointments or online. So as far as the poll worker training, so normally we would have, and we have to train about 1,500 poll workers and volunteers to work at our vote centers, because we're doing vote centers under the Voters' Choice Act. Normally, they would come in, let's say we had 50 people in a class, and they would each work hands-on after the training, which was classroom style, of course, close together, and they would work hands-on on each piece of the equipment as they go. So you're first looking, let's say, at an electronic poll book, and then, you know, 50 people are coming through, touching the same poll book, doing equipment at the same time, the same piece of equipment. So they redesigned it and broke it more into, we had pods that were a certain square footage. And instead of doing one piece of equipment and moving on, we kept the same people in a pod. So this pod or squared off area had each piece of equipment that was socially distanced, set apart. And we were able to train the same like 4 or 5 people in each group. But that meant we did have to start training earlier because we had to do smaller groups of training. So they did do splitting up the training, of course, PPE and cleaning in between. So that's how we altered the pollers training. And as far as the in-person voting, where people come to our office and vote, or any one of our 100 vote centers, we actually had to change the layout. We had Visio layouts for every vote center so that an election worker, poll worker comes in. The equipment should already be set up, but this tells everyone where the equipment should be, how the flow should work, and where everything goes specifically, the entrances, the exits, etc. So we changed those layouts. In some locations, we did have to adjust the number of pieces of equipment down a little bit to fit with everything being 6 feet apart. We added additional signage for our safety protocols and PPE, personal protective equipment, that we were giving to our poll workers and to the voters. And we also had to kind of increase our backup plans about voters who may not want to wear a mask or cause basically a scene. So we are going to use our curbside voters for such situations as needed. So those are kind of the main things that we did in relation to COVID to be able to, implement those safety protocols and be ready for the things that we thought were coming up before the July nominations started. Okay, Randy. So next, I wanted to focus, I was asked to think of some advice for the jurisdictions and understanding there's a lot of city clerks or city offices on the call, and then some tips and advice for candidates. So for the jurisdictions, I didn't really go much into nominations because, again, that's already passed for all of us, and the candidates. And I just really wanted to cover some of the general things I've learned in my 25 years here at the Registrar of Voters, and in dealing with districts and actually working and managing candidate services division myself for over 16 years, and working with all of the jurisdictions in our county. So I will begin with it's really important that you build a strong relationship with your county registrar. You've got to have that open communication, so that enables you to be able to ask questions and get guidance and to understand each responsibilities, because we really need our 80 jurisdictions to understand our timelines, the critical points that we have, and how those timelines and how strict they are, because we have deadlines to meet, such as, we have strict deadlines to turn all of the candidate and measure information over to our ballot layout division, of which they only have, it's roughly 6 weeks-ish to prepare thousands of different versions of your ballot and candidate guide. So really understanding those timelines and deadlines, and how I used to work with every jurisdiction, was really, really important and should be done. So keep that open communication. So for candidate filing, as the cities, they normally prepare their own nomination forms, such as like the Declaration of Candidacy and their nomination papers, which is the petition where candidates go out and collect signatures. So it's critical that the ROV get these reforms back from candidates. So we give the city clerk forms in addition to what they make that we need back. And an example of that would be like for a translation of a candidate's name. Maybe the candidate has a preferred transliteration and they want to use that, a name that they're known by in the community, or do they want us to do our own translation? So we have several additional forms, including the one I just spoke about, that we give to our city clerk and ask them to return that to us. Another thing that we do is we develop an abbreviated election calendar for our clerks, because our election calendar in here is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of items, but we make a two-sided piece of paper with the abbreviated calendar with the key dates for candidate filing, FPPC, and measures, like when our measure arguments are due. So I would recommend that you reach out to your county registrar and see if they have such a calendar, so that you can be following all of the deadlines that the county is dealing with and what we're expecting from a jurisdiction or a city to give to us. So another thing you should do is about the trainings that I mentioned. You should check as a staff member in a jurisdiction, see if your county offers such training like we did, a city clerk, a school district, and a special district training, so that you can get more detailed information and really go over the forms, and another opportunity to ask questions and actually learn more about what the Registrar of Voters does. So I would recommend you check and see if they offer such a, a similar type of meeting that you could attend. In addition, it's really important to understand the measure deadlines and the measure process. As you know, if you've set your own measure deadlines, there's the election code allows us to set those deadlines. Sometimes there are rules about it being, set a certain number of days, maybe after a resolution was passed in a city. But we as the county set our deadlines, and we set them as late as we possibly can to allow us then to prepare our thousands and thousands of versions of the county voter information guide. So that deadline is very important to a city, let's say, that is setting their own deadlines, and your deadline should not go past what the county is, so the county's deadline. So we ask our city clerks, you can have your deadline at the latest the same as ours, which is fine, just don't go past our deadline. So many of our city clerks set them earlier, and some do set it for the same day as our office, but which is fine. But please don't set those deadlines after the county registrar's deadline. That's really important for both entities. And court challenges. And as you know, for those of you who have been to court, most often the Registrar of Voters will be also named. Let's say one of your city candidates is suing another candidate. Maybe they don't agree challenging their ballot designation or their candidate statement, a sentence in there. Maybe they feel it's misleading, so they go to court and go on a writ of mandate to seek a writ. Please let your Registrar of Voters know as soon as possible, even if you hear about a case or a potential case, and especially when you do receive that first document, because I go to court often, been doing that for like 20 years. I go to court, so does the city go to court. And the county is named the Registrar of Voters because we are the ones that actually produce the county voter information guide or the ballot. So we have to be named because the judge needs to do the court order to me, to our office, so that they're instructing me to take the sentence out of the candidate statement, because we're the ones producing the information for the voter. So please, let the Registrar of Voters know as soon as you have any inkling about a court case. And always refer to your, appropriate statutes or regulations or city charter. There's another thing I've learned after all of these years, look in the election code, see what it says. It's like my Bible, the election code. I do deal with some other codes, public resource, government, etc. The majority of my work is in the elections, the California elections codes, but please look into that for direction first. And always, of course, talk to your city attorney, because they're the ones who are going to be defending you in court, just like I do. Constantly check in on things with my county counsel, because she will be the one that has to go to court with me to defend any of the actions or processes that we do. And lastly, I would recommend you follow legislation. As it's going, throughout the year up until the ending time, and we'll see what goes to the governor, et cetera, and what gets chaptered or not. It's really important. Maybe you're able to provide a legislator some information that they need to put into a bill, or you're following the draft of the bill and call them and provide some input, like that really doesn't work well, or did you think of this? It's really good. I have good relationships here with my elected officials so that we can talk and discuss anything related to certain bills that they're writing. And I think just as important, if not more, on legislation is that you need to follow what is coming up, what is being talked about out there in the state, what could be happening to some of the process you're doing. And by knowing what's coming, you can be looking ahead and making plans, and maybe a look at associated costs for your budget for potential items. So it's really important and a good idea to monitor the legislation throughout the year. So now I'd like to focus in on the candidates that are in the office. And again, just because nominations are done for you, I thought we'd focus more in on what can you do from today to election day, because we're almost about a month out, and it's almost that time. So candidates are, they're campaigning at this time and communicating with many of their voters and people that they're trying to get to vote for them. So people, when you're out there talking to your candidates, you will a lot of time, be asked, well, when can I get my ballot? When am I going to get my ballot? When am I going to get my county voter information guide? How can I vote? When do the polls open? A plethora of questions that they're going to ask you. So it really is a good idea to understand like the deadlines and the website and the Registrar of Voters of what information they have and what kind of voting model. So we are one of 15 counties that is under the Voters' Choice Act. We're not under polling place model anymore. So after over 100 years of using the polling place model in Santa Clara County, we went ahead and changed to the Voters' Choice Act, VCA. And we implemented that in this March election earlier this year, so this will be our second election coming up in November. But the difference there are differences in the two voting models, so you as a candidate should understand those differences, especially if you are a candidate that the district is into more than one county. Because, like, let's say, our county touches San Mateo, they're also Voters' Choice Act. But all of the other counties that we surround with on our other sides, they are not the Voters' Choice Act. So there are a little bit differences in between. So you should understand, which model for which county, depending on the county that the voter is from that may be asking you questions. And again, as I had started to say about knowing the registrar's website, we have a lot of information online for candidates so that they can see those voting deadlines, get information about the voting model, voting registration, voting by mail, etc. So get to know the registrar's website. And also on there, we have how-to videos. So for this year, we created just very simple videos, and that was based on feedback we have been getting that people don't know how to fill out a ballot. People were scared to register, didn't know how to do online registration, and what is it like when I go to a vote center? So we made these simple how-to videos, and we also have gotten them translated with subtitles. So we have those on our YouTube and links on our website. So see if other counties have such information, or if you happen to be in Santa Clara County, you can use those. And there's also other information on there. We have a media kit that has social media messages and graphics. So it's all laid out by what day of what week it is in a certain month, and we give you suggested messages for social media, make it very simple that you can just copy and paste and send that on. So look for things like that, advertisements. We have that online also with translated versions, and you can send those and share that voting information with all the people on your mailing list and all of the people who may want to help you, share those email lists, community-based organization, friends of yours. The more you can help spread the word about voting, along with, of course, your campaign material, I'm sure, you're helping yourself and you're helping the voter. So the next thing is about utilizing data and maps from the Registrar of Voters. So you may have already done this. Some of you may have already gotten precinct maps or walking maps or mapping information. We do have that at the Registrar of Voters. That's available. And we have, like data reports that people use. And especially right now, over all my years, I've always seen at this time frame, starting, next week, we have reports where candidates can obtain a report of voters who voted, we call it. And I've had candidates, they come in 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they're here to get a list of the voters who like just submitted their ballot, like yesterday. They're coming in every other day because they want to stop targeting them. They don't want to mail them any further advertisements in the mail. They don't want to make calls because they know they've already voted. So they're trying to save time and focus their target as the days get shorter till election time of the ones who hadn't voted. So we do have information that campaigns may find, very helpful at this time when they're doing their campaigning. And lastly, I would say, excuse me, it's very important to understand electioneering. Electioneering is, understanding those laws around electioneering, because as you are not allowed to campaign to electioneer within 100 feet of the entrance to a polling place, a vote center, an elections official's office, or a ballot drop-off box. And let me read the definition just so that we're clear on the electioneering. Electioneering is defined as the visible display or audible dissemination of information that advocates for or against any candidate or measure on the ballot. So, this includes campaign buttons, hats, campaign material with vote for John Doe candidate on T-shirts, or doing, speaker phones 50 feet out from the poll center. Can't do that. So really understand where you can stand, how, what 100 feet away looks like at each of the vote centers or from the entrance at the polling place. So I hope, Randy, you can go ahead. I hope that you find this information, something helpful in here, whether you're a jurisdiction, a city clerk, or a candidate. And again, this is our contact information on the screen. And you see in the upper right-hand corner our I voted sticker. That is our new I voted sticker for this year for Santa Clara County. And we will be mailing that in your vote by mail packet that gets mailed out to every voter. So you get a little preview. We will also have it available electronically online for those voters who would like to share with social media. So thank you very much for your time, and I'd be happy to answer questions later under Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Really appreciate your informative presentation. And I got to say, I'm looking forward to getting my sticker. Unfortunately, it's not from your county, so I won't have all those wonderful languages displayed. So thank you for sharing that and for providing the option that it can go on social media too. While you were presenting, you mentioned multimedia videos. So I went ahead, found it on your website, and shared that link with the audience. And again, I do want to ask that audience to please go ahead and chime in with your questions so that we can collect them and share your questions and concerns with any of our panelists, including Shannon and the presentation she just made. We're now going to go ahead and transition to our second speaker, and that will be Nora Pimentel, Assistant City Clerk with the City of Santa Clara. And I'll go ahead and introduce Nora through her biography. Nora's been a municipal government worker for more than 29 years. She's worked in various capacities at different city departments, including general services, finance, city managers' offices, parks and recreation, and neighborhood service. But she decided to pursue her passion as a city clerk. She enjoys performing the vital role of liaison between the public and the council and responding to inquiries and helping residents better utilize other municipal services. In California, the city clerk has an additional vital role as the local official who administers democratic processes such as elections, access to city records, and all legislative actions, ensuring transparency to the public and accurate legislative history. Nora has held positions of Senior Deputy City Clerk for the City of San Jose, Deputy City Clerk in East Palo Alto, and City Clerk in the cities of Tracy and Saratoga. For the past 2 years, she served as Assistant City Clerk for the City of Santa Clara. With the goal of being the best that she can be in her profession, Nora participated in outside studies, earning the designation of Certified Municipal Clerk in 2009, and in 2017, she earned the designation of Master Municipal Clerk. She also strives to contribute back to her profession by being an active member in the Institute of Municipal Clerks and the City Clerks Association of California. She also serves as a board member for the City Clerks Association and was region director for Central Valley in 2015-16. As a vehicle To better service government and the public in her role as city clerk, Nora also became commissioned as a notary public, and she is bilingual in Spanish. Nora graduated from high school and attended community college in San Jose. She is married, lives in San Jose, and is the proud parent of 2 grown children and grandma to 4. Nora, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your expertise and experience about the election cycle and COVID and what's happened and what's going to happen for you in the next 4 weeks. Hopefully you can see the screen and you're all ready to go.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Randy. It's a pleasure being here, and welcome to everyone who's joining us this morning on this webinar. I'm going to briefly go over some of the things, won't be like Shannon's, but I'm sure there's a lot of clerks out there that are listening in, and I know the nomination period already has passed, but I'll just share my experience and as well as what my experience has been under COVID. Next slide, Randy, please. So the role of the city clerk, facilitating the local municipal election process consolidated with the County of Santa Clara, educating our candidates and being in compliance with FPPC rules and regulations, and definitely having an internal collaboration within our organization. I began preparing for this election around the February-March timeframe, putting together my to-do list and calendaring key dates, such as the resolution when it was going to go to council to call for the election, when notices for publication needed to be posted, and I started building the election website, providing general information to the public. As Shannon mentioned, as clerks, we look forward to attending that ROV annual election training because we feel that's our time to brush up on what we did 2 years ago. Well, this year we did it remotely via Zoom, and Shannon provided us with all the tools we needed to provide to our candidates. I became familiar with the different forms. You pay attention to the new changes. I'm sure most of us remember 2018 when we got the new requirement of phonetic spelling for the purpose of the audio ballot. That was interesting, and definitely my practice has been that I prepare those ahead of time so it makes it easier for the candidate and I to get through that. I like to integrate my key dates because I'm a charter city and there's certain requirements that we have, maybe a little different from the general law cities, but with Shannon's abbreviated calendar, I add in a few of those dates. And as she said, election code is our Bible. You order your new one for the year of that election and you brush up on it, and mine's all highlighted and tagged with different areas that I know sometimes come up. Every election is bound to have something new to learn, so it's always good to have that handy. As educating the candidates, we're assisting them in navigating through the electoral process. When we issue them their nomination papers, we're providing them with a lot of information and resources. Therefore, it's important for us to become very familiar with the material we're providing them because a lot of questions will come up during the issuance of those materials. We want to make sure our candidates are in compliance with the FPPC rules and regulations and that they file these forms timely. It's important to schedule an FPPC training for candidates and treasurers because this is very helpful to them, especially for first timers. There's a lot of forms that they have to fill out, a lot of and the different nuances and how and which forms they need to fill out at what point of the process. So we definitely, as clerks, have to take advantage of when they have their webinars. We also participate. I always say you can never get enough of FPPC training because there's always something to learn. One aspect of my internal collaboration is that I prep my staff. I provide them with key deadlines so that when they're fielding the calls, the incoming calls, because my staff answers the citywide line, they're able to provide candidates with information. So as clerks, if you have staff in your office, remember you're not alone. Empower them, provide them with information so that they can assist in certain aspects. My deputy city clerk, she's my right hand and has been there with me throughout the beginning of this process, reviewing and brushing up on things. Also, I collaborate with my city attorney because there are many legal aspects during the election process. And then there's code enforcement who enforce our political sign ordinance. So if we receive a complaint that a sign is not in the right place, we forward those calls to them. Next slide, please, Randy. So what was it conducting an election under COVID-19 this year? I'm sure many of you probably have your stories and your challenges that you've come across. Definitely unprecedented times, nothing we've ever experienced. Shelter in place, when has that ever happened? Well, we attended the ROV training, as I mentioned, via Zoom, and then we had to prepare to meet with our candidates under totally different circumstances, taking into consideration now protocols, wearing our mask, disinfecting rooms and surfaces, sanitizing our hands, maintaining that 6-foot distance. This year, I was ready to do the in-person, and as well as if somebody didn't want to come in and do it virtually. All of my candidates came in person, and we followed all the protocols. But I'm going to share with you the importance again of training your staff, because I had to quarantine myself and my family for 2 weeks. 2 weeks into the nomination period, there was an exposure to one of my family members in my unit. The good thing is that nothing came of it. We all tested negative. But I'm not going to lie to you. I freaked out because I was like, how is this possible? How am I going to finish this process? We're only 2 weeks in. We still have a few weeks left. And I just thought I was going to lose it. But then I thought, wait a second. Simrith, my deputy, and we were ready for this. She knew what needed to be done when the candidates came to file. So I had to pivot quickly and find that solution. And knowing that she knew the steps, she was at City Hall. We had all our appointments. The good thing is we had already everybody that had came to pool papers had already scheduled their appointment to file. So we were good on that front. All the papers had been issued. So now we were just waiting for folks to file. So she greeted them at City Hall, took them into the conference room, and I was on virtually via Zoom. I was able to administer the oath of office to the candidates via Zoom, and I was able to count the ballot statements with my deputy. So we made sure that we both had the same numbers. So we had a method. We developed a system, and we got through it. But I'm going to say it definitely took a coordination and quick thinking and pivoting in that moment. Next slide, Randy. So lessons learned. Listening to our candidates' feedback to improve our process, clarifying any misinterpreted information, being flexible and nimble. And what I mean by this is that during this process, and we've heard this with Shannon's presentation, building relationships is key. We're working with many different people. We're assisting many people, and we're working with other agencies. And as I say, our candidates, very important, listening to their feedback, because we can incorporate their suggestions into our next cycle. For example, I heard from some of my candidates that an FPPC training would have been preferred earlier than when I had scheduled it. I scheduled it 1 week after the nomination period began. So I'm going to do better for the next election. Mistakes are going to happen, and it's tough to be in that situation, but we're not perfect. What we have to do is learn from them and make it right. Clarify any misinterpreted information that perhaps we may have given. Just be honest and provide that clarification. This year, I learned that the Form 497, 24-hour reporting report, does not apply to my candidates because they can't accept more than $630 from a single source. I understood aggregate to mean a whole of $1,000 being combined by several contributions. Well, that wasn't the case because FPPC's interpretation is not that. So I had to clarify that with my candidates after I had explained to them when they issued them their binder and all of the forms. But the positive of this is that I was able to catch this early on, and I clarified it, and there was no problem. They all thanked me, and that's one less form they have to deal with. Sometimes we're entrenched in our ways, but when COVID hit, we needed to be flexible and nimble. We needed to adapt quickly and change direction to be able to continue to provide that service that we provide to our community. In conclusion, our next slide, Randy. the best practices, and we've heard a lot of this from Shannon and throughout my presentation about building strong relationships, because we work with, like I said, different people, agencies. FPPC, strong partner. You know, FPPC provides us with these trainings, and like I said, need to take advantage of them. They provide us with other resources, their hotline, their email advice. I have taken advantage of all of those because I cannot to pretend that I know everything about all those forms. And different things come out in different elections, even being in different jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions, easy peasy, there's no hiccup. Other jurisdictions, Santa Clara, it's very busy over here. Different types of forms are being filed, some that I've never seen before. And so it's quick, adapting to that, learning it, and being able to always refer your candidates to FPPC because they're the experts. As clerks, we're not. The ROV, another great partner. And as Shannon said, open communication. If you have questions, you don't understand the form, they've all been great partners over there, answering the question, making sure I'm understanding their deadline or whatever the case may be. Also, they provide great resources that we provide our candidates. I mean, just this morning, I was providing someone with the link at the ROV as to where all the ballot boxes are located and all the voting centers. And lastly, but not least, our candidates. These are the folks that are working really hard to make a difference, and they can also be future bosses, and we should start building those relationships now, not wait until they get on the council. We need to build trust and confidence. So with that, I conclude my presentation. I thank you for your time, and I will also be available for any questions after. Thank you. You're muted.
Thank you so much, Nora. Really appreciate the information you provided about the experience you've had in the city of Santa Clara through the COVID election cycle we're facing in 2020. Very helpful to hear kind of how you pivoted and made changes and the best practices and relationships that you've developed and fostered and strengthened through this particular cycle. We're going to now transition to a wonderful resource that you mentioned during your presentation, and that's the services provided through the Fair Political Practices Commission. I do want to thank Dr. Alana Jeydel for joining us and for sharing the information that she shares through her role as education manager at the FPPC. Alana, if you allow me, I'll go ahead and read a little bit about your bio and then invite you to share in your presentation. Dr. Jeydel joined the FPPC in April 2019 as a political reform consultant. She was hired as the manager of the FPPC's education program in November of 2019. Prior to joining the FPPC, Dr. Jeydel was a full-time faculty member of the Department of Political Science at American River College for more than 11 years. She received her PhD in political science from American University and has published in the area of women in politics, local government in California and Oregon, and on the women's movement. Dr. Jeydel, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing information about this election cycle and best practices from the FPPC. I will go ahead and stack your slides, so please just let me know when to move on to the next one.
Thank you, Randy Kay. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you to Nora and Shannon. It's always fun to put faces with names because we usually speak to you guys on the phone. So this is just my intro slide, so let's move to the next slide, please. So what we're going to cover today, it's going to be a similar format to what Nora and Shannon did. I'm going to focus on the support and the services that the FPPC provides to candidates and to clerks, and to talk about some best practices for running for office during COVID-19 and maybe at any point. Next slide, please. So I will address the first two support services in greater detail on the following slides. But in terms of point 3, the formal advice letters, I'm not going to go into great detail about formal advice letters. Suffice to say, we also offer these advice letters for more complicated advice to those officials whose duties are implicated under the Act, which provide a formal analysis. If you'd like to receive formal advice, you can begin that process by writing to advice@fppc.ca.gov, and that email address will show up later on the slide. or you can send your written request to the California Fair Political Practices Commission at 1102 Q Street, Suite 3000, Sacramento 95811. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry, one more thing I want to say about advice letters, but you can go to this slide, it's fine. If the request for advice contains sufficient information and the question is within the FPP's jurisdiction, the FPPC must provide formal written advice within 21 working days, and the response will be provided in the form of an advice letter. Okay. So to this next slide in terms of our supports and services. So, we provide advice line. We offer phone advice Monday through Thursday, 9 to 11:30 a.m. Our phone number is right there. And we also offer email advice. Phone and email advice answer the same types of questions. We're two separate teams, but we offer the same kinds of questions and we have the same training. It's really just a matter of preference, which mode one person uses. We often joke with people, because our times are 9 to 11:30, and sometimes a pressing question hits you at 9 p.m. and you can't go to sleep, to just type it into the advice line so that you can go to sleep. But we're both there for you with the same kinds of training. There are times that we are going to refer callers to the email advice team. So if you, for instance, have a conflict of interest question, you're wondering if you're allowed, if you're a candidate, or an elected officer, and you're wondering if you're allowed to vote on a certain measure, those kinds of questions must be written in. We're not allowed to give any kind of conflict of interest responses over the phone. And some questions are going to require legal interpretation, and they'll require an attorney to look at them. So we're not allowed to interpret the law unless there is a formal advice letter that's been issued, and we can refer you to that. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I want to emphasize today is the amount of information on our website and the fact that we realize that our website can be challenging to navigate. So I really want to try to help you find your way around the vast array of resources that we have. And I tried to use some little arrows to try to direct you to some of those specific things. First, we're going to move on to talking about candidates and treasurers, but the main page where candidates and treasurers will want to go is the campaign rules page. So you can see that's one of the arrows there. Then there's also an arrow there for guidance for filing officers, which we'll talk about, and then the arrow for training and outreach. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So the campaign rules landing page has a vast array of resources for candidates and treasurers. The picture here shows the list of tabs that will be on the left side of the campaign rules landing page when you get there. I've highlighted the ones that are going to be of particular use to candidates and treasurers, and in particular, the manuals are crucial to candidates. And Manual 2, I often joke because of my professorial background, I always tell candidates that Manual 2 is their textbook for running for office, and that they're basically running for office as a college class. So their textbook is their campaign disclosure manual, and their the when and where to file campaign statements, their filing schedule is their syllabus. So I tell them to post their syllabus on their refrigerator, and so that they don't forget, set reminders in their phones or in Outlook, whatever works for them, and to download Campaign Disclosure Manual 2. So that's one of the key things that they really need. And that when and where to file campaign statements page has links to the filing schedules, and these schedules will tell you what type of report or statement must be filed and when. And really, again, they are your syllabus for running for office. Next slide, please. So in particular, we created a few years ago this candidate toolkit. It was designed explicitly with first-time candidates in mind. It's really a one-stop shop for all the links that you might need to get started and to run your campaign. So when you get to that candidate toolkit page, you can see the Getting Started tab. It'll link you to campaign reports, to communications, for after the election, so you don't forget about terminating your committee, and so forth and so on. So that candidate toolkit is super useful, and we have been trying to send as many people there as possible. The treasurers tab is also a great resource for treasurers so they can become familiar with their duties and responsibilities. So if you are a treasurer or you have one who's wondering how to navigate the job, please do send them to that basic rules for treasurers web portion of our website. Next slide, please. So what have been the challenges during a pandemic? So we know how tough running for office is, and a pandemic has only made it more difficult. A key challenge that has arisen during the pandemic has, of course, been getting signatures on the campaign forms, and Nora and Shannon have discussed this a little bit. So I'm just going to note that the FPPC, as well as the Secretary of State, have issued guidance on how to deal with this problem during COVID-19. So the link that's in this slide is the FPPC guidance for campaign forms, and the Secretary of State on their website, when you go to lobbying and campaigns, when you click on that tab, the first thing that will come up is a PDF in an alert box about getting signatures on the 410. So both agencies recognize that challenge, and we have issued legal guidance that is designed to make it simpler, right? Or at least acknowledge those challenges. Another key challenge that we've noted, obviously, and many of you have noted, is the processing of the 410. Many people have submitted a 410 but have not received a number yet, or it has taken a very long time to get it. The Secretary of State has reported a record number of 410s submitted at one time this year. So historically speaking, the Secretary of State has never received this many 410s at one time. I sort of joke with my callers that basically everybody woke up on the same day and submitted their 410 on the same day. And so the Secretary of State, when you combine that historic number of 410s, which I think is wonderful, an example of the health of a grassroots democracy, but when you combine that with a pandemic, the Secretary of State is backlogged. They are catching up, but we know that that has been a challenge. And so what we have done in light of that is every time we get a caller who is stressed and concerned about that 410, we actually work with them and to help them understand all the things that they can do without that number. Because to be honest, there's quite a bit that they can do without the number, and I'm going to discuss that on the next slide in a moment. In addition, we've seen a lot of candidates who have questions about disclosure on advertisements, both paper and online. This form of outreach will be crucial during a pandemic, this kind of electronic or flyer advertisements, because you're not necessarily going to be having a lot of face-to-face campaigning conversations with people. So we are also here and able to help candidates navigate the disclosures and how to provide appropriate disclosures on their campaign communications. Next slide, please. So what can a candidate do without a committee ID number? They actually can do quite a bit. They can open a bank account. The Act only requires the following regarding a bank account. The Act requires that it be at a bank with a physical office in California, that there's no commingling of funds. So I always joke that your grocery money is not in with your campaign money, and that there's only one account per election. So many candidates actually open a personal checking account and find that that works perfectly well. I think one of the challenges for we don't regulate the banks. So if a bank asks for the number because you want to open a business type account, that's not anything we can help with. But if you go in and you simply ask to open a personal checking account and you use that account just for the election, only campaign money goes in and only campaign money goes out, then that's fine. You're complying with the Political Reform Act. So a personal checking account can be used. One may just need to shop around to different banks and find one that will work with you. Just again, remember to spend that money from the campaign bank account. What else can you do without, and again, a lot of candidates, just to sort of backtrack for a moment, think that they cannot accept money until they have that number from their 410, which is not correct. Once a candidate has filed their 501, their candidate intention statement, once that form is filed, and a candidate has a place to put their money, a candidate is free to accept contributions and obviously then deposit those contributions into a campaign account, and then you're free to spend money. We've tried to encourage candidates to think about other ways to solicit money if they're having trouble with the bank account. We've encouraged them to maybe ask their friends to do a non-monetary contribution this year instead of monetary. You know, maybe pay for my business cards that I need, or pay for my campaign flyers, because that way, instead of that person donating or contributing $500 to your account, they're making that contribution, but in a non-monetary way, so that you don't need the bank account yet, right? So that's a helpful way. So you can make flyers and yard signs without the number. Chapter 7 of Campaign Manual 2 is my go-to chapter to send candidates to. We do have the ad disclosures separately listed on the website, but I find the manuals the easiest place to actually understand the campaign disclosure requirements, because they're very specific. What's in the manuals is very specific to the specific topic of the manuals. So for candidates, I always send them to Chapter 7, page 4, which is where a really nifty little chart starts that tells you everything you need. So for candidates, the paid for by campaign, that disclosure that's in there is recommended but not legally required. So you don't have to have your FPPC ID number yet to be able to print ads. It's recommended but not legally required that those disclosures are on there. So I always, again, sort of tell candidates to just print out Chapter 7 and carry it around with them. Because one of the things that we see a lot at the FPPC is that wonderful involvement of citizens in trying to monitor elections, but also misunderstanding of campaign rules. And many people think that that disclosure is required on candidate flyers or candidate door hangers or candidate yard signs. And while, again, it's recommended, it's not legally required. So again, as I noted about asking for non-monetary contributions, but the other thing we've encouraged candidates to do without their candidate ID number, because you don't need a committee ID number for it, is to zero out a personal credit card. Zero out that personal credit card and use it just for the campaign. That way you can make some expenditures before you have a bank account. So if you haven't been able to open that bank account yet, because for whatever reason you're having trouble finding that bank that will do it for you, you can zero out a personal credit card, only use it for campaign expenses during the campaign. Then once the campaign is over and you've paid it off, you can go back to using it as a personal credit card. So you can zero out that credit card and use it just for the campaign to pay for expenditures. So if you're a candidate who's still in that position of waiting for your 410 and you're feeling stymied as if there's nothing you can do, these are things that you can definitely do. Just a reminder, a bank account is needed no matter how much a candidate decides to raise or spend if that candidate accepts even one contribution from an outside source. So a candidate is required to open a bank account no matter how much they're going to raise or spend if they accept even one contribution from an outside source. And a bank account is always required if you raise and or spend $2,000 or more, even of your own money. Next slide, please. So some best practices for campaigning during a pandemic. Remember that everything is going to take longer, from the mail to getting signatures. So give yourself plenty of time to get everything done. Assume that everything will take longer than normal. Make sure that you're getting the correct information. Friends and other candidates may be well-intentioned, but they may or may not have the correct answers, and they may not fully understand your specific situation. So be sure to use our website and to call or write to us. We hear from many people who think they cannot make flyers, for example, without a campaign ID number because someone told them that they could not, but they really can. So be informed, and we are here to help. We also hear from many people who say, I wish I'd called you 3 weeks ago. So please be that person who calls us on Monday. We are here to help you. And as face-to-face campaigning may be slim to non-existent this season, be sure to familiarize yourself with the ad disclosures for everything from Facebook ads to your flyers. These will likely be your main go-to for reaching voters. And again, Chapter 7 of Campaign Disclosure Manual 2 has the handy chart that will help you with all of your disclosures. My favorite disclosure question of the season has been from a candidate who wanted to know if they had to put a disclosure on their face masks that they were going to hand out, their pandemic cloth face masks. And no, articles of clothing do not require disclosures. So you do not have to put a disclosure if you're going to create face masks for your campaign. I really love that one, and I wish they'd send us a picture. I hope they did create those face masks. And I think the final kind of best practices for campaigning during a pandemic, but at any time, is to attend one of our webinars and to watch our videos. And I can show you where those videos are a little bit later, and attend one of our webinars. We've been offering a lot of them, whether they've been asked for, requested by an agency, or we've just hosted a number of ourselves. We're actually having one on October 7th. We know that it's late, but actually it's right in time for that second pre-election report. So the two that we offered recently, the one in September and the one in October, will focus heavily on the 460 and on ad disclosures and after the election. Next slide, please. Campaign filing officers. We offer a lot of resources to you all. And in fact, one thing we put together this year was a welcome brochure of sort for campaign filing officers. We did mail it out as an email link to everyone who we have in our MailChimp subscriptions, who subscribe to the FPPC email list. If you did not receive one and would like one, please feel free to email us at seminars@fppc.ca.gov. That email will show up at the end again, I believe, and if not, we can type it in. But if you didn't get one, we're happy to email that link to you, and it contains a multitude of different links and information for you all in terms of the things that you might need to do. And in particular, I'm making note here of the resources for filing officers page, campaign filing officer duties, and Form 700 filing officer duties. Next slide, please. Of particular use that we have for filing officers, for campaign filing officers, will be under that guidance for filing officers and then campaign filing officers link. We have form retention schedules. We have sample non-filer letters. We have links to the enforcement system. We have links to campaign forms and campaign manuals. And of particular use to campaign filing officers right now, because there were a couple I spoke to this week and I directed them to this, we have a Form 460 review and amendment request guide, and it makes the process of reviewing the 460 and requesting amendments much simpler. So please, make use of all of those. We know that accepting paper filings has been tough for agencies that don't have electronic systems. We are here for you and know that you've been confronted with a number of massive challenges, and we really admire what you've all done. I mean, when I listen to Shannon and Nora, I'm just in awe of everything that you guys accomplished this season to make this season bearable and really wonderfully manageable for candidates who are running. So we're here for you on phones and via email. Filing officers call us regularly with questions. Just remember, we can't answer third-party questions. And so if a candidate comes to you as a filing officer with a question, please have the candidate call us directly. A lot gets lost in translation. So when the candidate tells you their concern and then you try to explain it to us, it's hard. We're not allowed to answer third-party questions. What we'll do if you call with a third-party question from a candidate is we'll attempt to sort of direct you to some educational material that might help, but we won't be able to answer it necessarily in full, and they'll need to call us. All right, next slide, please. An important change since the onset of the stay-at-home order has been our switch from in-person to online trainings. For the foreseeable future, all of our trainings will be in the form of webinars. And while we miss in-person, we are so excited to be offering these webinars, and the response rate has been amazing. We've had anywhere from 25 to 250 people at a time in these webinars. If you'd like us to conduct a free webinar for your agency, just fill out the webinar request form. You can see the arrows pointing to it in two places here, and email it to seminars@fppc.ca.gov. You can see that, that'll be on the page. That email's in a couple places on the page. And just send it on in. It do give us a few weeks, usually sort of 3 to 4, maybe 5 or 6 weeks turnaround. One of the things that I've noted as we approach SEI, Statement of Economic Interest filing season, is that it's taking people a long time they'll put in a request, and then I'll ask them a question, and then they have to ask someone else a question to get the answer. So the scheduling is taking a little while, so please give yourself plenty of time to schedule a webinar if you want to do it, but we would love to do one for you. Next slide, please. Here's our upcoming trainings page, and you can see different ways to get there. You can access these trainings by clicking on the one you're interested in on the table, or you can click on the appropriate tab on the left. So if you're a candidate treasurer and you want to see what kinds of trainings are there, you could just click on the candidate treasurer tab, or you can, if you're a filing officer and you want to see what filing officer trainings there are, you can click on the filing officer tab. So multiple ways, and we update that table regularly. So every time we add one or delete one, we update that, that table. Next slide, please. All right, so that kind of sums it up for me. I want to thank you so much for attending, and I am definitely here to answer questions. There's the FPPC contact information, our phone number, which is just really Ask FPPC, and our email. So thank you again, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much, Alana. I really appreciate your presentation, the wealth of information you offered for candidates and filing officers and for staff members of our local agencies. And I want to invite all of our panelists, Shannon and Nora, to please join back in, and we can do our question and answer period. And we have about 10 minutes left before the end of the hour, so I will get to our questions right away. And if if all of our panelists can make sure their mics are on, that would be great. I'm going to start off with a question that goes to Shannon. Could you perhaps explain a bit more about where you cannot electioneer?
Sure. Well, at any of the vote centers or around drop boxes or polling places or the election office, you're not allowed within 100 feet. So like our poll workers even sometimes will have measuring tapes that roll. So you could even ask at a vote center, like, do you have, where is the 100-foot marking? Or, you know, if you can show me where that is, and then as long as you're on the other side of where they pointed out where the 100 feet is, you are allowed to electioneer, but it is 100 feet from the entrance of the door of where the voting is actually taking place. So there are, I could look up the election code. It is explained in the California Elections Code. So people could also do searches online where you can look up code books and do search for electioneering under California Elections Code and get a lot more of the specifics. But the basic, most important part is 100. Think of it as 100 feet from the room where people are voting. And voting could be just dropping off your ballot, though, not actually having to go in a voting booth and do that. So that would be my recommendation for that.
Thank you for elaborating. We did have one particular person share some experience of people parking trucks outside and trying to calculate distances. And is there any advice you offer to, and this is a question for all of you, what advice do you offer for any of the cities that might be experiencing this with kind of calls or complaints that they receive?
Well, for me, we have had people who had within 100 feet had signs in their cars, and if we could not figure out whose car that was, we actually went out and put a big piece of paper like in their windshield under the windshield wiper and covered it. You know, to then at least, because we couldn't move the car and police wouldn't be able to get inside the car. So that's what we did. We actually covered the sign that was in the car so it was not visible within the 100 feet.
Thank you. Well, a question we have, I think, for Nora, this came from a city up in Northern California. How much responsibility does the clerk have in educating the candidate in filing his or her Form 410 and Form 470? Would providing a link to the FPPC's campaign toolkit suffice?
Thank you for the question. Well, when we're issuing the nomination paperwork, we go through all the forms that they'll be filing, and I do explain to them what the 410 entails. If they hit the $2,000 threshold, that they can also file it before hitting the $2,000. And then I reference FPPC if they have further questions. That's pretty much the information or guidance that we provide.
Thank you. All right, this next question is for Alana. It comes from a city clerk from the Central Valley. Is there a simple chart that shows where the FPPC forms should be filed? For instance, the 401 should go to the Secretary of State. Form 700 goes to FPPC, and Form 460 stays at the city office. Any suggestions, or is there a tool?
So there are some charts actually in the manuals that will tell you where the different forms go. I don't have the pages off the top of my head, but there are charts within the manuals. Basically, the general rule is that in terms of candidates, and I'm not going to speak to say like slate mailer organizations or anything like that right now, but for candidates, the only form that's going to the Secretary of State is for local candidates. The only form that's going to the Secretary of State is the 410, and every other form that a local candidate files goes to their local filing officer. So it's a fairly straightforward rubric, to be honest, right? And so the 700 just sort of depends on what kind of a candidate it is, how those get, whether they come to us. So again, I'm not sure if we're talking about candidate form 700s or agent like code filer form 700s. That one's a little bit more complicated, but there are, if you go to our website, and I didn't provide this because it's not campaign related, but there is wonderful information on the form 700 tab on our website. You click on file a form 700 and there's a lot of wonderful fact sheets for filing officers there that the form 700 unit has done, because that's not us. We do trainings on the form 700, but we don't necessarily do all the material. But I think, again, look in the manuals, and the general rule for local candidates is the 410 goes to the Secretary of State. Every other form a local candidate or even a local general purpose committee will file will be at the local level.
Thank you. A question we received from a smaller city in California. We've had a few community members ask us questions about measures on the upcoming ballot. How do you respond or educate your community on measures without people perceiving the information as biased?
I can start. Wait, and the Registrar of Voters, obviously we are nonpartisan. I don't care who wins. I just care that I have a fair and accurate and transparent election. So, we do, of course, mail out a county voter information guide that has the arguments in favor and against, and a nonpartisan impartial analysis about the 500-word limit of analyzing a measure full text. So they can go use our county pamphlet that is sent out to every voter and make copies or get some of those to give to anybody calling. Also, I think it's Voters Edge. The League of Women Voters has a nonpartisan website where they have information, and they have offered a free opportunity to post information more than the 200-word candidate statement, let's say, they can do with us. So they have nonpartisan information on the Voters Edge. And then there's your state pamphlet, of course, which has information about the state propositions, because our county guide does not contain that. The state mails that out to everyone. So they can go online to get the state pamphlets in any version too. Our county pamphlets will be up by the beginning of the next week for people to refer to our website. And then the League of Women Voters, Voters Edges, nonpartisan, those would be the three places I would start with.
Thank you so much. I've got another question related to electioneering. It seems to be a very important topic that we need to kind of help provide some more content on. This one comes from a Southern California city. We're hosting a drive-by ballot drop-off event. How do you deal with electioneering on cars as they drive up to vote?
Well, I mean, if they're driving up and dropping off the ballot with you, I mean, hopefully there's not other voters that are standing there with you. Most likely they're just driving by, dropping off, and leaving. I mean, what can you really do? I have had people who've come into our office and refused to wear, take off a pin or cover their shirt up, and had to just move them up to the front of the line and, handle their ballot and get them out of here as quickly as possible. Otherwise, my choice would be to actually call the police. If we were at a vote center and someone's absolutely refusing and causing a scene, we would need to call 911 if possible. But honestly, I don't think there's much you can do if you're just standing there accepting ballots. But the good thing would be that people are driving off right away. I mean, I assume they're just handing your ballot and then they're leaving. So, that part is not contemplated in the elections code.
Certainly a 2020 experience. We're at the almost the end of the hour. I'd love to just ask a round robin question of all of you. What are your biggest concerns between now and Election Day, and how are you looking to problem solve or anticipate these challenges? And any advice for folks as they make the final push?
I just say be patient. Continue providing the guidance. What we're experiencing is we're getting a lot of calls of complaints of where the signs are being posted, or someone's flyer's missing an FPPC number or a mailer. And so it's that collaboration, working with the attorney's office, like, okay, what's our response to this, or with our elected city clerk as well. So we're almost there. Just be patient.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nora.
Sorry. From my end, I would say, if you're a candidate, attend our October 7th webinar to help you fill out your 460 and learn about ad disclosures and what to do after the election, which many people forget about. They're exhausted after the election and they forget that they have reports to file, or that they should terminate their committee before their money goes surplus. So, attend a webinar, make use of our videos, become familiar with the elections code so that you're not plaguing Nora and Shannon with questions saying that the FPPC number is supposed to be on a candidate's flyer when it's not legally required. Right? So, become familiar, try to empower yourself and make use of the stuff on our website, and give us a ring so that we can tell you where it is if you don't know where it is.
Thank you.
And for me, I guess the two items would be the same for both the districts and the candidates, is get that list of the polling places or vote centers in your county. Ours is online, excuse me, for anybody right now. You may have voters who, as a candidate, ask you where to go vote. Our cities always get calls on where's my local, where's my closest vote center that I can go vote at. That they get it all the time. So we give our list to city clerks and anybody who would like that. So I'd recommend both voters and city clerks know where those lists are or have those. And then the second thing is more about results. Be patient for your certification of the election. We have 30 days by law. So knowing that and understanding that. Once, many years ago, I had a city set their certification or swearing in of a candidate before we actually certified the election. I was like, well, how are you going to do that? So make sure, that you're aware we have 30 days to December 3rd to certify the election. For several weeks, we're counting ballots after. Got to do provisional ballots. We need to do conditional voter registration ballots, we call CBR, etc. So there's audits and 1% manual recounts. There's many things we need to do, so it does take us the full 30 days. So as a city or district planning your swearing in of candidates, it's important. And as a candidate, it's just important to know why it takes so long and how long it takes. But we in our county will put up daily updates every day we count ballots. So understand results and know where your voting locations are.
Thank you, Shannon. Really appreciate the incredible advice each of you have offered and shared your experiences of running this election cycle through a global pandemic. And I also really just in general appreciate the collaborative nature and the relationship best practices that each of you has shared here, and how you can contribute to a more positive experience for candidates, staff, and all involved in the election process. So I appreciate your time today and your expertise. And I want to thank our audience, all of the candidates and incumbents and staff and elected officials and consultants who took the time to join and learn and hear from experts in the field about their experiences and best practices through this 2020 election cycle. I will offer just a brief closing on behalf of the Institute. We welcome you to stay in touch. We want to be a resource to you and your teams, and especially to those candidates who want to continue to learn about local government and experience how they can actively participate and engage in decision making. And for those of you who are already incumbents or who are going to have the opportunity to serve, we have a wealth of resources available to you. As a clarifying information, we will have our recording up as well as all of the slides available to all of the audience members. We'll also be distributing it by email through the GoToWebinar platform, and look for that information to be posted by Monday on our website so you can have access to this and share it with those who might not have been able to attend in person. And with that, I do really want to thank our partner at the Scpc, Dr. Alana Jeydel, who I believe this was your idea, and perhaps some of your team members that said, let's do one final push and get some more information out. And we couldn't have done this without you. And I really want to thank both Shannon and Nora, who gave us their amount of time during this incredibly busy period, and really just appreciate your expertise and time. And sharing some information on behalf of our speakers today. Just want to thank you all. We'll have the full slide deck and the recording up next week. So on behalf of the Institute for Local Government, thank you for sharing your time and for being with us today.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.